Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and note the members present, members of council, members of staff, and those who are joining us in the gallery. I'll start off this evening's meeting by doing a land acknowledgement. We will begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathering on the land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We would like to recognize that we are in the Robinson Superior Treaty Territory, and the land on which we are gathered today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. Specifically, we acknowledge the neighboring community of Mishkot First Nation, for whom we have great respect. We also recognize the contributions of all Indigenous peoples, including the Métis, in shaping and strengthening the community and province of Ontario. Thank you, and miigwech. We will move on to item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Emmanuel, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda. I'd like to move item 7.1, a draft policy for temporary outdoor patio, to item 4.1 and move item 4.1 to 4.2.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to move that, to approve the agenda as indicated? Councillor Cannon? May I have a seconder? Councillor Opato? All in favor? Carried. Item 4.1. Mr. Sabourin?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. As the agenda says, I put forward a policy for temporary outdoor patios for restaurants and licensed establishments. The Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario has changed their framework for approval of that, and I've downloaded it to the municipality to supply a letter to these establishments. We had no actual policy or procedure on how to apply for that, so I put one together and I'm presenting it to you tonight. In the past, during COVID, the Algoma Gaming Commission allowed these restaurants to use outdoor patios so that they could get business, so that they could expand their distance between customers. We gladly helped the establishments by approving these without too much concern. But now that it's part of their new framework, we'd like to put a policy in place. And I recommend that you pass a bylaw to allow that policy to come into effect.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Is there any questions or comments? Kevin, my only question was, and it may already be in there, my apologies if I may have missed it. Have you done any consultation with any businesses that may be using this policy or may have already had experience with?
I dealt with 3 establishments already during COVID. They were the North of 17, the Viking, and the Wawamotor. So it's pretty well all the businesses. The Lakeview already has a deck already outside, so that's already been improved. It wasn't temporary, that's permanent.
Perfect. So they certainly had opportunity to provide input.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think you're looking for indication that we are in favor of creating a bylaw.
Review it and we'll bring it forward for a bylaw next meeting.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.2, Mr. Austin Hemphill, Alamos Gold. And Austin, looks like we're getting the microphone fired up for you, and your presentation is up on the screen. Councillor Hoffman, did you want to turn off one of the lights?
Okay, no problem at all. So who's going to be running the presentation? Ruby? Okay, terrific. Hey guys, can you hear this?
Yes.
All right, terrific. I think many of you guys have probably met me already. In case you haven't, I'm Austin Hemphill, the general manager of Alamos Gold's Island Gold operation, just outside of Duberville. I think Mel and I have worked together a little bit in the past, so it's good to see you again. So with that, I'd like to give you a bit of a presentation on our operation. I think you might have heard about it a bit in the press and other places here, but I want to provide a little bit of detail. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we'll give you a bit of a background of Alamos Gold. And this is kind of an interesting day for us. Actually, today we're celebrating 20 years as a company. So it's not part of the presentation, and mining is kind of a bit different than many industries here. Usually it kind of rides on the back of a kind of almost a cult of personality when they get founded. We tend to have a bit of a believer in the deposit or the operation. In our case, we started with an operation in Mexico. It's called Mulatos, right? It's in the Sonora state, which borders the state of Arizona in the U.S. But what happened, there was a deposit there that our CEO had confidence in, but almost nobody else did. So what happened is you want to talk about going all in, he actually went ahead, put a second mortgage on his house, didn't tell his wife about it, obviously, until all the paperwork was signed. And he went ahead and actually founded the company. And then he started off with about $100 million in basically shares that are out on the market at the time, started on the Toronto Ventures Exchange. Now we're a little over $4 billion. So, I mean, it's definitely a big growth. And in that time, we acquired the Young-Davidson operation in Matachewan from Marico, and then obviously ourselves from Richmont in 2017. So that's the way we've grown, and since then we've become a much larger player. So we've talked about our operations. So obviously Island Gold, we're located outside of Duberville. We have your Young-Davidson mine, which is a large underground mine outside of Matachewan, which is in the eastern side of the province, outside of Kirkland Lake. It's about an 8,000 ton a day mine, but it's a lot lower grades, about 1.7 grams per ton, whereas we're 1,200 ton a day at 10.2 grams per ton. And then our Mulatos mine, which is an open pit, which is actually running down the original Mulatos operation. We have the Yaqui Grande on the other side of the property, which is growing. So that's it. So those are our main operating mines. Okay, and throughout that, we have just shy of about 2,000 employees. Obviously, between ourselves at Island Gold, which is about 500, there's about almost 800 at our operations at Young-Davidson, and then the Mulatos operation is predominantly run by contractors in the operations side, whereas processing and management is in-house. One of the things I want to talk to you about too is our values. You can see up there, the first one's obviously safety, as you can imagine. I mean, we want to make sure everybody does go home safe every day. At the end of the day, want to make sure we're able to have a good environment for everybody there, and that's obviously fed with teamwork. We work together. We make sure everybody is also safe as well as productive. We look at environmental sustainability. As you know, and the mine's here for a short period of time, right? The ground's there before. Obviously, we've had First Nations people there, like you said at the beginning there, the acknowledgement, since time immemorial. And ultimately, they'll be there after we're long gone. So we want to make sure we do treat the environment with the respect it deserves. We minimize our impacts on it. And at the end of the day, hopefully it's better after we've left than before we arrived. Obviously, integrity. We're a company of the people of our word. When we say we're going to do something, we do something. At the same time, at the end of the day, hopefully you see we're all committed. We are committed to what we say and we're committed to what we do. With that, if we can go on to the next slide, please. So a little bit about Island Gold. As I talked about, we're outside of Duberville. We are an underground mine right now. We acquired the asset from Richmont Mines in November 2017. The mine itself started in 2007 under Richmont Mines and Patricia as a joint venture, and ultimately Richmont bought out Patricia. There's also a historic operation there from the 80s. If you remember there, Canamax was operating it as the Crimsar operation, right? At the same time, Magino, I think, was going as well. So there's a couple other operations. You guys know better than I, kind of preaching to the choir on that one. But we are now, at the end of the day, one of the highest grade mines right now. If you take a look at it globally and within publicly traded companies, I believe we're number 5 or number 6 in highest grade, and we're also number 5, number 6 on lowest cost producers. So we're pretty well positioned in regards to operations in the world. Since we declared commercial production in 2007, we produced just over 1 million ounces. So we're averaging right now about 140,000 per year. And then we're operating about 1,200 tons a day. And what we have an expansion project. And again, I give you a bit of that background. You see, we're calling it phase 3. Phase 1 was basically to get ourselves up to 800 tons a day and then to 900. And then the phase 2 is to get us up to 1,200. Now phase 3 is to take us down to 2,400. We initially put forward phase 3's 2,000 tons per day. We've had a lot of results in developing our resource. So we then decided, we can actually get it up to 2,400 tons a day. That's why it's phase 3 plus. It's the extra 400 tons a day. So right now, when we look at it back into 2020, which is the last year we have full data on, is we did about $16 million in gross spending on goods and services, and about $38 million we pay in wages and salaries. And that's about what we average year to year, obviously indexed up with inflation. Going to the next slide. So ESG, this is kind of a bit of a hot topic, but you take a look at it. We are a member of the World Gold Council. Right now, we are working towards being comply with all the responsible gold mining principles. We recently did an audit there. We found there's only a couple small gaps we can fill to be compliant. And part of that also is environmental stewardship. Like Nish right here, he's in charge of our environmental and community relations department. So again, we do work very hard at that. Again, the work's never done with that. We got, like I mentioned before, we got to make sure we leave the land as good, if not better, than when we found it. We do have a lot of indigenous engagement now. Right now we have 3 CBAs signed. We have one obviously with Michipicoten First Nation. We also have with Missinaibi Cree and now Batchewana First Nation. Okay, and we are working right now towards developing the same type of relationship with Garden River. Okay, and obviously social performance. You see, now we're starting to reach out a lot more. I think obviously Mel, you can see there's a picture of you up at the recent golf tourney there with us, with Adnan. So yeah, that's what we're doing. Is we are at a point now where we think we need to reach out. And one of the things we identified is, we do have very well-defined relationships with First Nations, but we don't have that type of relationship with a lot of the other communities. So we want to make sure we develop a similar type of relationship where we have good communication, we have good interaction, we build a team between ourselves. Okay, if you want to go on to the next one, please. Let's talk a little bit more locally. So what we do is we do focus a lot more on hiring locally, but we know we've kind of depleted the pool, if you will. As we know, housing is one of the biggest objects here, is a limitation for us. And then we get into it, then there's other services and other things we need to look at to improve the environment. But right now, you take a look at it, when we say 925 workers, that's contractors as well as in-house. We're just around 500 employees ourselves. And where that comes out to be is about 42% are local. Roughly we're about 40-60. If you go back a couple years, we were 60-40 when I initially got here in 2018. And since then, what's happened, we've just grown. We've basically kept our local employees. You look at the average tenure of our local employees is approaching a decade, whereas our non-locals are usually about 3 to 5 years. Okay, so what happens is when we expand, we keep the ones we have, and we wind up having to add more and more on top of it. Most of them are coming from out of the area. Right now, it looks like the predominance of our hiring right now is coming from the Sudbury area, but we're also starting to see more and more coming from further afield. We are starting to get some interest from Thunder Bay, as well as we're starting to get interest actually further and further south. What we're seeing, areas closer and closer to Barrie as an example now. All right. About 70% of our workforce right now are women, and about 21% of our workforce is under 30. As you can imagine, we're seeing that big demographic shift I think we've all heard about. We're now experiencing it, that we're seeing the age of our workforce is getting younger and younger each year. Historically, it used to be basically flatline, and you started to see it getting basically a year older every year. Now we're starting to see it go down a little bit. Okay. Overall, in 2020, again, this is the last year we did this detailed analysis, about 37% of our supplier spend was local. And by local, we mean basically within the region. So that's obviously Duberville, Wawa, White River, and actually we go all the way out to Sudbury and what we consider local. So it's stuff within basically a day's drive distance. All right. And 98% of our spend is in country. So it's one of the things that makes us a bit unique, is we're not dependent upon a lot of things outside the country. Well, basically the two things we need really is cyanide for our process and the grinding media, which are steel balls. Those are the two things we really need to rely on. And again, we're looking to spend about 1.3 million right now with suppliers that are self-identified as Indigenous, but that is growing. As we are building relationships with more of the First Nations, we are seeing a lot more interest through First Nation business partners, as well as First Nation-owned businesses. Okay, and we work with a lot of our vendors to improve their capacity through training and upskilling. And one of the things we did identify is, especially post-COVID, a lot of the know-how left these industries. So what we found out is that basically the knowledge level and the skill level of them dropped. So now we're having to be more and more involved in developing our vendors and their capacity to make sure they can deliver what we need. Want to go on to the next slide, please? This is a bit of one. I don't know how familiar you guys are, but if you take a look on the left-hand side of the slide, that was the year previous to our acquisition of the operation. And we started off with just a little over 1 million ounces in resource and reserves. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the difference in the terminology there. I think you are, Mitch, but I mean, just a long story short, resource is what you identify to be in the ground, and reserves is effectively what you have a plan to extract. Okay, so that's where the two differences lie. And the big difference in that is the level of understanding. So the more information you get, whether it be through diamond drilling or through drifting through it, we identify and we improve it. We started over just over 1 million, and now we're over 5 million ounces in the ground. And a lot of that is through a lot of our regional exploration as well as in mine. What we're finding is we were able to also increase the average grade by about a half gram over that time. So that brought us a lot more ounces at a lot higher grade. So about 11% of it, again, in 10.1 in the reserves and 33% of it inferred. And then the big thing we're seeing is it further and further out. And we're continuing to see a lot of this success. And this is ultimately what drove us to look at the expansion. Go on to the next slide. So again, this is another way to take a look at it, and you can see our cost, that black line on the left, kind of going down to the left to the right. That is the reducing in our cost per ounce. You can see we're about $1,500 an ounce US, and we're just a little over $1,800 right now. So now we've reduced our cost to sub $900. So I mean, that's a pretty significant improvement there. And part of that also is in our increase in production. You can see we've started off at about 42,000 ounces per year in 2012, and now we're up to over 140 in 2021. Right now, our run rate is somewhere between 130 to 140,000 ounces per year. That's about where we run. Okay, and then we can talk. You can see the phase 1, 2, and 3 thresholds down there. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So let's talk the phase 3 plus expansion. Like I touched on, we're going to be doubling our production rate, and a couple of things that are changed on that. Right now, we access our mine through a ramp or decline. Right, we just basically literally drive in from the surface and go underground. We're just over 1 kilometer deep right now. And what we'll do is we're continuing, obviously, go deep. And what our ore body does is it kind of plunges down to the east. So as we go deeper, it goes further east, and it kind of goes further to the south. So one of the things you can imagine, the quickest way to travel between 2 points is going a straight line, right? So instead of going the decline, which it doesn't go a straight line, it does a corkscrew, right, as we chase the ore body as we go down. So what we're going to do is we're going to be sinking a shaft. We've actually already started that project. I'll give you a bit of a detail on that, but given the fact that we don't really know where the bottom of our ore body is, we try to design in a bit of capacity. So we're designing our shaft to go down to 2 kilometers to 2,000 meters deep, with the initial stop just shy of 1,400 meters, where we'll develop our loading facility, everything underground there, so we can start skipping our ore and waste to surface as we continue to develop the resource deeper. Okay, so when we did this study here, we're down to about 1,500 meters in our drilling. We're just a little over 1,600 meters. As you can remember, when you're drilling this from surface there, to drill 1,600 meters from surface to intercept the ore body, you're drilling basically 2-kilometer holes. They're neither fast nor inexpensive. So what we've done now is we're now refocused ourselves to do a lot more of our drilling underground. So the net result of this is by installing this shaft, increasing our production rate, we're able to reduce our operating costs on a per ton basis. So that means that we can then mine more. And this is kind of the advantage we have of this, is by doing that, we're able to obviously reduce our costs pretty significantly. So take a look at this. At the end of the day, post shaft completion of 2026 will increase our production rate from about 140,000 ounces to almost 280,000 ounces per annum. So that's a fundamental increase, obviously. When we take a look at a lot of the investments we had to put into it, as we talked on the shaft, we also do have to make what's called a paste backfill plant. Again, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but part of our process is obviously we bring the ore rock to surface, we have to crush it, and then we grind it in the mill to expose more and more of the surface area there. We treat it with a cyanide solution to extract the gold. And then we extract the gold, and the solid material that's left over is called tailings. I think you guys are very familiar in that, given the history of mining in this region. Right now, what we do is we take that tailings, we put it in our impoundment area, and we store it. We remove the water from it, process the water there, get rid of the cyanide, get rid of any other deleterious materials that are in it, and then ultimately discharge it to the environment after it's clean. Okay. The problem is we're accumulating this solid mass. What the paste backfill plant does is it takes a portion of that tailings, squeezes the water out of it through a vacuum process, reintroduces water and a binder there, which is cement and smelter slag in our case, that we can make basically a cement slurry, and then we introduce that back underground to backfill the voids we generate by mining. Okay, so that gives us a couple benefits. One, it gives us a better fill product for underground. Right now we just take the broken waste rock, and sometimes we add some cement to it. The problem with that, neither one is an engineered fill product, so we can't really mine underneath it. And they don't really provide much confining pressure to the ground. So what happens, the grounds can still move a little bit. So this makes us a better fill product. And at the end of the day, it also allows us to store the tailings underground where ultimately they're safer, right? I think we've all probably seen some of the disasters that happened in Brazil or out in Mount Pauline, BC. That's what happens when tailings impoundments are not managed properly. Well, this lets us again put some more of this material underground in a safer location there, and it'll be inert. Okay, and then the final one is the expansion of the mill. Right now, our mill does the 1,200 tons a day we get from the underground. We have to get a bigger mill to process that. Okay, and now during this, we're going to see ourselves ramp up from our 500 full-time employees to 1,200 with our contractors, and then basically post-project will be between 600 and 700 long-term employees. Okay, so you want to go to the next slide, please? So this is the site. If it was okay with the council, I'll go up here and kind of talk to this. It's kind of hard to see the picture. So those of you who have been out to the mine site there, this is the road that comes from Duberville. It comes down to Goudreau Road. Magina's operations over here to the west. And over to the east as this continues on, obviously out to Localish and then ultimately to Missinaba. So this is our mine site, our surface facility here. This is that tailings impoundment I mentioned before. This is where we treat the water. We call that our secondary pond. So we remove the water from the tailings impoundment after it's been processed a bit, and we process it further here to make sure it's safe for discharge to the environment. This is our existing portal, so that's what we call. We kind of have some old-fashioned vocabulary in mining, and portal is one of the other ones, right? It's the portal to the underworld, if you will, into our mine, and that brings us down underground. And actually, the majority of our deposit actually comes from Goudreau Lake here and comes down to the south as it goes deeper. So what we're proposing to do is right here in our existing mill, we'll improve our existing mill to handle the additional tonnage. We'll construct our paste plant here just north of the road. And right now we've built and improved an access road over to here, and our shaft site will be here south of Goudreau Lake. Because you remember our ore body is dipping down to the south, so as you go deeper, you're further and further to the south. Now, by locating the shaft here, we actually pierce the ore body at about 350 meters. So by the time we get down to that 1,400 meter depth I mentioned earlier, we'll be closer to the ore body than if we were to sink the shaft north of the road. Okay? Go ahead, Melanie.
Austin, will you be closing off the existing portal and then?
No, we'll continue to use it because this is the advantage you have. The more openings to surface you have, the more advantageous. If you've ever worked around a shaft, there are certain things that are not the easiest things to get underground that way, like mobile equipment is an example. I've worked other mines where we've had smaller shafts, and what you have to do is you actually have to cut it up into pieces, bring it underground, reassemble the pieces. Sometimes you're actually cutting the steel into smaller pieces. The only thing you don't typically cut are the tires for obvious reasons. And the rest of it you'll get underground. Here the advantage we'll have a 5-meter diameter shaft, but we'll also have our portal that we can drive most of the heavier equipment down underground. It also gives us an ability, there's more than two ways to leave the mine, because right now what we have the portal, and then over here where we have our fresh air raises, we actually have a ladder way that goes all the way from the bottom of the mine all the way to the top. Okay, and what we'll have the shaft site here, and we'll have some temporary explosives magazines here, and this little red dashed line you see here is the proposed new power line. The way the power comes from us, as you guys are probably familiar, it comes up from Hollingsworth, comes up through Hawk Junction, and then basically goes north following the old railroad up there until it gets to Goudreau, where it splits off parts, so it goes to Duberville, and the rest of it comes here and heads east across here. But the problem is it goes right over the top of Magino's pit. So they like to mine their pit, so we have to relocate the power line. What we're doing is we're going to relocate it south of Goudreau again and bring it across here, and that's how we're going to service ourselves. Okay, so that's the general layout of the mine. Any questions on that? Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, now this is a long section of the ore body, and what you see here, these areas in gray are what we've already mined, and then the rest of it here is based upon our reserve or reserve class. So proven reserves are red. Those are the ones we have the most confidence in, and these are really close to the areas we're mining, because as we drill it off, we develop through, we get better and better understanding of it. So we typically, your proven reserves are small, and they're usually pretty close to what you're going to be mining. Probable is a little bit less information. This is the orange area, and then the blue as we get down into inferred. The purple, there's not much as the indicated. So this shows us what our ore body looks like. So this is where we started the mine, was all up into here. In these areas we call Localish and Goudreau. They're very high grade, very narrow, very conventional mining. You guys might be familiar with it as jackleg and stoper type of work, very hands-on, if you will. But as we get deeper, the veins open up, they get larger, and we're able to be more and more mechanized. And what we're now is we've pretty well gotten away from the jacklegs and stopers from a production perspective. We still use them for a little bit of ground support and some surface installation, but we predominantly mechanize our bolting cycle as well. As we get deeper, we're into the larger areas. We're much more mechanized. And you can see this black line is the shaft location. You can kind of see it. It doesn't show up very well in this image, but you can see these kind of these corkscrewy lines. These are all of our ramps. And what we do is we ramp down there to access the ore body. We typically ramp down 4 or 5 levels, which is between 80 and 100 meters. And we produce our way back up out of those areas and we come back down, and that's how we mine it. Okay, and then like I said, the shaft will be here, and you see it's somewhat centrally located. But the big thing we're seeing is we're seeing our ore body kind of go off here down to the east. So that's why we located our shaft here rather than here. As an example, and like I said, it kind of steps off into the page here with the ore body, if you will. So that's what it looks like, and that's why we're also stopping at about the 1,400 meters. We expect we'll continue to develop the resource a bit more, but we know we have this, and we want to make sure we can get it into production a little bit sooner, so that's why we picked that depth. Okay, if we want to go on the next slide. Okay, so now this is a picture of our head frame. So at the top of the shaft on surface there, you have the tower, and if you can see, there's the black lines that come off. Those are actually the hoist ropes. The green lines are what we call the back legs, because as you imagine, you're putting a lot of tension on those ropes. The back legs keep the tower from bending over. Okay, like I said, we kind of use some old-fashioned terminology in that. So what we designed the shaft to do is to do 2,000 ore tons a day, plus about 1,500 waste tons a day from 2,000 meters. And what we realize is if by stopping at the 1,400 meters, we still have this kind of extra capacity. And what we're looking at doing with it, again, is that means by hoisting from a shorter depth, the travel time from the loading pocket to surface is shorter. I think everybody can imagine that means you can do more cycles in a day, which means you can move more tons. We are estimating we can do about 4,500 tons a day combined. And that's where if you do 2,400 tons of ore, that means you have 2,100 tons of waste capacity. So that gives us enough capacity to continue our operation. The way we're going to do it is we're going to put 2 hoists in here. So what we have is we have our production hoist, which is a double drum, double clutch. It's a large 5-meter diameter, 2-meter wide drum. 2 of those joined together mechanically. We can operate them individually or we can operate them together when they're clutched in. And they'll each have a rope going, and one goes over top of one drum, one comes from the under. So as the drum rotates, one gets longer, one gets shorter. So it's overwind, underwind, respectively. So we have a 12-ton skip. So each skip will have 12 tons of rock in it, and it'll travel about 15 meters per second on steel guides. Now, what we're doing here is if you were to look at the shaft from the surface, it's a round circle, right? It's broken into what we call 3 compartments. 2 compartments will handle these rock-carrying skips, and the 3rd compartment, which will be isolated through brattice walling and everything in the shaft, will be our personnel and equipment riding side, which we call a cage. Okay, so the skips will be separated from that, and by being on the steel guides, we can travel at a higher velocity. And we take a look at this, we can do, like I said, the 4,500 tons a day. So that's how we'll be able to do that. Again, we went pretty textbook with this, where actually it's a Canadian source Hepburn hoist that we bought here. So again, it's all actually Ontario made. A lot of the big steel fabrication was done overseas. Got to give you a bit of history. We made this decision in, I think, July 2020. We all know what was going on in the world at that time. But we kind of took that as an advantage, in that we were one of the few that are out there actually shopping for this. And one of the things, and especially with a hoist like this, is that things like a large-scale plate rolling is not commonly done. There's only one mill basically in Europe that was available. We're able to book in, so we've actually had this hoist for a little while. We've actually bought it ahead of time. We're able to secure it. So we're able to do, and the same thing we're doing is we're shopping for ropes and other work. And we also bought a lot of our steel ahead of time because we kind of knew that this was going to happen. So we actually went out and hedged the steel itself. Okay, if you want to go on to the next slide. So this is the other side of this. This is the service hoist. So attached to that is basically the big box, if you will. It's going to have a middle platform that's removable. That'll allow us to transport personnel underground, and then ultimately bring any other kind of materials there, ground support, any other explosives or any other products underground. These ride on timber guides, because what that is in case they're, when people are riding it, you got to expect that there's got to be a high level of safety there. And what happens in the case of, say, the rope were to break or some other mechanical issue in the shaft, as soon as the rope tension leaves, there's mechanical devices, these brakes on there, they're called dogs, again, mining using the old-fashioned terminology, actually release and they grab into the timber guides. The reason why we use timber is they'll grab onto it, they don't stop suddenly, causing injury. They'll actually stop a little bit more slowly. I can tell you I've been in a couple dog-out incidents there, and even then, that's not the most subtle experience you have in your life, but it does beat the alternative pretty handily. So that's the way we're going to design that. We do about 7.5 trips an hour. And the way you take a look at it right now is we'll be able to take 500 people underground in an hour. Okay. And it goes down there. Right now, it takes us somewhere around an hour and 10 minutes to get from the wicket area where everybody gets their daily work assignment to the work areas underground. By doing this, we'll cut that down to about 10 minutes. So it's a game changer. Oh, they will. I mean, it's in and out. I mean, the advantage you have too is you don't have to drive. There's a lot of the frustration that comes with that. It is a lot more quick. We're going to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the paste plant I talked about previously. And again, what this does is it'll take a portion of the tailings. So what will happen, the way we're designing it is all ore that's processed in the mill will be put into the tailings line. The solids will come back into the paste plant and then ultimately return to the tailings impoundment. And when the paste plant can run, it'll grab a portion of that. Like I said, it'll squeeze the water out through a vacuum filtration process. And then we'll add a little bit more water to it in a controlled fashion, add our binder to it, and make the slurry descend underground. Okay. What this does is it allows us to make an engineered fill product. We can deliver it hydraulically. Right now, like I mentioned, we have to mine basically 5 blocks high. The problem is if we put just that loose rock into it, what happens if we mine into it from below? And gravity will take over and it'll fall out, right? So what we have to do is we have to leave a portion of the rock behind, we call a pillar. The problem is that's ore. So you can imagine there's gold locked up in that. We have to mine in underneath it. So we have to leave a pillar there. And then since we can't fill it from above, we have to leave also a vertical pillar. So what happens is about 8% of our ore body be locked away in pillage if we don't have paste fill. So by having paste fill, we can extract that much more of the ore body. In addition to that, we can dispose of some of the tailings underground. We're anticipating just under half, at about 44% of the tailings will go back underground as paste. Okay, it's about a $52 million project. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. Just a couple bucks. Just a couple bucks amongst friends. And this is the next one here. This is the mill expansion. It's a 2,400 tons a day. If I kind of go to this drawing again, as you know, we have an operating mill. That mill was actually started under the Crimsar era in the 80s. So it's seen a couple tons. We've done a series of expansions here, and what you see in the gray is kind of the existing, and these areas that are highlighted in colors are different levels of improvement. Right now we use basically what we call conventional leach, where you just take the ground up ore, introduce it to the cyanide solution, stir it around. And then we have what we call CIP, which is carbon in pulp, which means you actually put activated carbon in there. And activated carbon actually recovers the gold cyanide complex and allows us to remove the gold from the solution. So what we do is we replace the leach tanks, turn them into CIPs. That allows us to more rapidly turn over the gold from the ore to the carbon. And we'll improve what we call ADR, absorption, reclamation. So that allows us to, again, recover the gold off of the carbon. And we'll also add a cyanide destruction circuit. One of the things is because our mill is so old and one was never installed previously, so what we do is we have to have that sunlight do it. The advantages of cyanide, we've all heard about it. We know it is a poison if it's exposed to the human body, but it's also very fragile when it comes to things specifically like ultraviolet light. So when sunlight sees it, it destroys it. So that's what we've been basically relying upon. And the problem is you're not in control of that process. You know, if you have a late thaw, if you have cloudy days, you don't get the process to work as well as you'd like it to. So we're going to be taking control of the process here, and we're going to be using a process to actually destroy it in a controlled fashion to make sure we get rid of it. Okay, so to improve our operation a bit. Again, this is about a $76 million aspect of our project. Again, it's not cheap, but I mean, it's definitely money well worth it. And this ultimately brings us double the processing capacity. Okay, if we go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of a big numbers slide here. So we break up our capital a couple different ways here. And again, hopefully everybody understands what capital is. Please forgive me if I kind of tread this ground you already know about. But the operating cost is pretty straightforward. It's the cash cost it takes you to run the business on a daily basis. And what we have is we have sustaining capital. It's capital we have to keep putting into the mine no matter what. If we're going to increase our production rate or not. So it's things like our ramps, our levels, things like that we have to put in anyway. That's basically sustaining. Growth is capital to do anything to increase your capacity. Okay. So you take a look at it there. Our phase 3, we initially anticipated to be about a $1.1 billion project, right? And we take a look at the total production over the life of mine is about 3 million ounces. Like I said, we had a lot of success in converting our ore body and improving what we had underground. So to improve ourselves to that extra 400 tons a day, it takes us about another $400 million. It brings us about $1.5 billion. And then, but that does bring us also 4.5 million ounces. So you can see that's a pretty significant increase in production. So, I mean, part of that increase too is inflation. I think we're all seeing it. It's not unprecedented, but it basically hasn't been since the 80s we've seen it at this level. And that was what we put into our model to make sure we understood where we're going to be. But a long story short, it costs us about $344 an ounce from a capital perspective. Huh? $344 for every ounce that'll be in the ground right now is about what we pay. That's how that 1.5 billion comes about. Just a different way to look at it. So but that's not cash cost. That's just the capital cost. You add everything into it from a cash cost perspective, will be in the $500 range. So that's not a bad spot to be in. Well, that's it. I mean, I can tell you what. I mean, it's those of you. You guys know what mining's like. There's good years. There's not so good years. In my experience, I started my career when gold was not quite $300 US an ounce. I started in a gold mining district in Nevada in the States. I tell you what, there was one job offered to us little new graduate engineers, and I was thankful I got it. So, I mean, this is the thing, is that times can come and go, but I can tell you, we're also, at the end of the day, at the end of this project, we're going to be one of the lowest cost producers in the world by a long shot. Okay. Okay, so if you want to go on to the next slide, I think. This is kind of give you a bit of an update of where we sit. So we start, like I said, July 2020, we announced to the world we're doing our phase 3 project. Last year, we said we're going to do our phase 3 plus. And this is where we made progress. So we built some administration buildings and a new mine dry, which is a change room. You guys are probably familiar with that at our site. That was basically tied us over from now until the phase 3 plus project is completed. So we'll have a new administration building, new dry facility, all that over at the shaft site. About 85% of our workforce will actually move over from where we're at right now to the other side of Goudreau Lake on a daily basis. Okay, so they'll basically be moved over to the shaft site. The other thing is we built a new warehouse. We did that last year. We've also done the underground workshop at 620. That's 620 meters below surface. We did a camp expansion there. We've completed that. That gives us about 262 rooms. There's a kitchen and bunkhouse recreation facilities there in town in Duberville. We've also done a tailings upgrade. So what we did here is we took a look at our tailings facility there, and the way you expand them is you basically build the dam walls up. Okay, and the last dam raise we did, we identified that we had an older designed dam. We call it a dike, number 1 dike. We had to actually replace it. It didn't meet the modern engineering standards, so we had to go ahead and replace it all. So we did that, and we also took a look at the entire facility, and we realized, okay, well, let's take a look at what kind of work can we do ahead of time. You know, instead of waiting to the very end to do your engineering, your geotechnical work, we've done all that. So now where we're at, we have a little bit of work to do on roading this year before we do our next lift, and we'll continue to do it. We do basically 3-meter lift every 3rd year. So that's effectively how that expansion goes. We take a look at, we did what we call our camp expansions. Like I mentioned before, we're going to have probably between 500 and 700 contractors with us here during the construction. And to house them, we did an expansion on our existing facility, giving us another 132 rooms. Taking a look at that, given our existing facilities plus the houses and other housing assets we own, we think that's enough to get us by. Okay. Take a look at it. Now we've actually sunk the shaft. And the way you sink a shaft here, there's a couple different methods. We're using the conventional one that most people have probably heard about, where you literally dig a hole from surface and go down. And the way we do that is you flatten off the ground there, and you set up, you drill a series of vertical holes. In our case, it's about 8 meters deep. You blast it in 3 sections, and you work your way down and do it again. And the way you do it, you have a little backhoe type excavator. You lower in with a crane, you muck it out, you bring it in, you put the people back on the bench there to drill it out. That's the way you do it. You do that for the initial 42 meters. Then we'll build the head frame tower we showed in the previous slides over top of that. And we'll insert the galloway, which is a work platform, and then we'll rope it up with the hoist ropes, and we'll start sinking where we actually have suspended drills off the bottom of it. So we no longer require the excavator. We'll actually drill and blast it that way. We have this thing, if you've ever seen the claw game in an arcade, it's something similar to that. That's called the cactus grab, but ours is kind of the one that shoots out from the side. Grab a muck bucket, it's called a clam, and puts it in the actual bucket to be lifted to surface. That's conventional shaft sinking. It's a lot more efficient, so we'll drill, blast, we'll muck it out, we'll bolt it, and we'll advance down, and trailing behind it about 3 or 4 rounds, we'll be doing basically what we call slip forms, where we'll pull out the concrete lining. After we reach the bottom, we'll then return back up, install all the steel infrastructure we need to, change the ropes over, install the conveyances, and we'll be in production. So we're anticipating that to finish in 2026. And you can see right there, the initial production from the shaft's anticipated in Q1 2026. Okay. So it's kind of a high level once over of our site and our operation. I'm sure there's questions here. So with that, I can open up the floor. Okay.
Councillor Hatfield, can I ask you to use your microphone, please?
It's Austin.
It is.
Austin, I happen to know a lot about the Canamex mine. My husband was the mine captain there,
Awesome.
and he originally did the first portal, so I know it a lot. But there was a ton of problems with water at that time. How is it now?
It's quite the opposite. We don't have enough water, if you can believe that. Yeah, really. Where our modern mine is, like I mentioned, is underneath Goudreau Lake. So we get a little bit of inflow from there, not very much. But yeah, on the Kremsar side, they did have a history of a lot of water.
Yeah.
We actually use that water a little bit in our process. And what we're seeing is the water recharge rates going down. So we've effectively drained a lot of that local aquifer. In addition, with our increased production rates on the other side, that's the thing we're looking at, is how can we actually get more water? So what we do is we actually do basically a somewhat closed circuit underground. We recover the water that flows down there, we use it for work, and then we send it out to the tailings impoundment for treatment before discharge. So what we're looking at doing is how can we get more and more water efficient? And that's the thing we are focusing on. But you're right, yeah, Kremsar was famous for being a pretty wet mine.
Terrible. Now, I could, like I said, I could speak to you all night, but I have a concern with that many men. Our hospital in Wawa's pretty small. And as it is now, we do Missinabie, Wawa, Dubreuilville, White River, and you say you can have up to 1,200 men working there?
There's 1,200 total assigned to it. At any time, somewhere around 600 will be there.
600 at a time?
Roughly, yeah.
And how many is there now at a time?
Right now, we're about 350.
They're doubling that. Because I just wonder what kind of a thing you could do maybe to help our hospital or
Okay, well, we've
what?
been in communication with Lady Dunn Health Center quite a bit. Actually, I speak with Katie and regularly, with Danica Switzer as well. I think there was a crisis meeting we had there a little while ago to talk about that.
Yeah.
We are right now supporting a lot of the locum process there. We do offer our flights. Like, we fly from a couple places. So we allow the locums to take it as well as their family members.
Good.
Because I mean, the conversations we had with the hospital were pretty obvious. I can tell you this, I like I said, I grew up in Southern Nevada. Once I started living in the north in Kirkland Lake, I fell in love with it. I think almost everybody else will have the same thing, but it has to be a positive environment. I think the hospital does a very good job with that, with the locums, getting them out, getting them involved in the community, getting them involved in events. And we're trying to help that out as well. In addition to that, we've been in conversations with the Minister of Health, because we understand that. I mean, that's like I mentioned before. It's one of the things here. We talk housing. Everybody talks housing because it's something physical you can touch. But it's things like the medical care. If you don't have that, you can't live here.
Yeah.
My case in particular, I have my two sons with special needs, and that's one of the first things we had to really verify was, could we get the health care we needed here?
Exactly.
But it is very near and dear to my heart, Counselor. So this is something we are paying a lot of attention to, and we are working very closely with the hospital on.
Okay, I thank you very much for that, because I'm the lady that's running the locum program and everything is doing an excellent job.
It's phenomenal. And you take a look at it, they are extremely frugal with the funds they get. They squeeze every nickel's worth of benefit you can out of it. They're doing an excellent job with it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Hatfield, I'll just add to Austin's answer. Alamos Gold did provide a letter of support to the briefing that we did at Roma, or when we had a delegation with the Minister of Health. So they did support that effort.
All right.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Cannon?
I just wanted to know, with the new hoist, the new shaft, do you have to train?
Yes, we do. And that's part of it. That's something I didn't touch on. It's a very good point, Counselor. What we're doing is we want to bring as much of this in-house as we can. And what we're going to do is right now we said about 500 employees. And what we'll be doing is we'll be ramping ourselves up to that over time. So we'll actually be hiring the employees. Case in point, some people might come on as a truck driver, as an example. Over time, we'll transition them because we won't need the trucks as much when we commission the hoist. We'll convert them over to scoop operators or other tasks. In addition to that, as we work through our mechanical group, our millwrights, we have to develop them as obviously shaft and hoist maintenance as well as shaft and hoist operators. So what we'll do is we see a transition coming, and that's what's part of our strategy, is to make sure that we do have a training regimen. We work very closely with the Phase 3 team. Obviously, we're all the same team at the end of the day. But that's something that's very critical to this being successful. I've done a number of these before, where it can't just be the project's handed over and said, there you go. That doesn't work. It's got to be we're working together. We're understanding, we are very tightly involved. Our maintenance group is very involved in the mechanical design and operation planning of that, as is our operations team. So we are absolutely planning to train everybody to take it over. So what we want to do is we want to have that long-term relationship with our employees. We want them to become, exit high school or wherever they want to exit in their academic career, come work for us and be with us for the long term. So I've been with the company now, almost a little over 12 years. It's been very good to me and my family, and I want to make sure it's very good to our employees and their families as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Hall.
So how many guys do you have working underground on a shift?
Right now on a shift, if you take just a look at Alamos employees, it's about 80 is roughly what we average, somewhere between 70 and 80 depending on day shift, night shift. So at peak right now, our total underground assignment, including obviously mine operations, mechanical and electrical trades, we're a little over 200.
So, and they're going down by truck right
They're
now.
going right now in the back, basically in Toyotas or haul trucks. Yep. That's a whole lot of people going down there and a whole lot of little vehicles.
Yeah. And then the other question is, so what can Wawa do for you guys? Like, should we be looking at supplying you guys with housing, or are your men gonna live out at the site?
To be honest with you, I would much prefer if they could live in one of our local communities. Right now, we talked about roughly, like we said, we're 60-40 right now. Of that 40% of our workforce, about 60% of it lives here in Wawa right now. They're roughly 60% of that 40, so about 24% of our workforce actually lives here, right? Because, Dubreuilville is a population of about 600 people, right? And we all know that unfortunately the numbers in this region are going down rather than up lately, but they're about 600 people. We employ a little over 100 employees from there. So that's a pretty significant portion of the workforce, of the residents, but that also includes children, retirees, all that stuff. So right now, actually, most of our local employees actually live here, and we only have a small number that actually live in White River.
I think in August 2022, you gave me a number of 108.
Yeah, it's probably gone up a little bit since then. We've actually had some people move here. We've actually had some additional move to Dubreuilville as well. But like we touched on there, the things that Wawa can do to help us, continue to keep doing what you're doing. Anything we could do, let us know where we can help also in like hospitals in particular. One of the obstacles we saw is education, right? And one of the things we are working right now with a couple school boards is how can we improve the education. As you can tell, I'm not a francophone, so my kids aren't either. So they actually go to school here. They all go to Mitchell-Pocotin High School right now. And one of the things we're looking at is how can we kind of improve that education. Any assistance we can do on that and trying to bring some English language education a little bit closer to Dubreuilville will be beneficial. But I think what we need to talk about, what are the critical services in the region? How can we all together work on it? I think we've identified healthcare as one of them. I think we can acknowledge education in general could use a little bit of a boost. But a lot of that's also housing. And we kind of get stuck in, the kind of catch-22 or chicken or the egg type of situation. How do we get more people to the area? If we can get more housing, we can probably get more people in the area. We offer a housing incentive. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I think, Mel, you are. Where we offer basically 2 tiers to it. We look at proximity. So Dubreuilville gets $50,000 payable over 4 years. So it's the signing of the mortgage, and it's the first, second, and third anniversary of that. And then there's $40,000 for Wawa and White River areas there. So we try to provide a bit of an incentive because we know, the problem we live in these communities are historically single industry towns, which a lot of banks are kind of hesitant to invest in. You look at the amortization period for a home. We got a 17-year mine life. The amortization period could be 20 years as an example. That's longer than the mine life. So the lenders get a bit concerned. So we figured that by putting this incentive out, we again worked with a couple banks, RBC, CIBC, and I think Scotia, just to see is this something that'd be attractive. They said, yeah, it's basically a level of security that they get by seeing that. So we worked with that, but the thing we got to look at is how do we get more housing stock? I think that's one thing we can look at. What can we do together on that? What kind of programs are available? Because when was the last time they built a significant number of homes in this region? I know Dubreuilville's been a long time. I think Wawa's been much the same. I know you have some unfortunate agreements there and selling certain lots before others and stuff like that, but is there something we can work together on? Is there some like third party we can talk to? But I think that's the initial obstacle we're facing. But in addition to that, how do we attract people to the area? How do we get our names out there? Like I said, we've had a number of employees come work for us from places, whether it be Toronto, even Elliott Lake. They come here and they actually prefer this region so much they actually buy houses here when they are available. So we have seen that, people fall in love with the communities. I know I was welcomed with open arms when I moved to the region. We're seeing the same thing happen to everybody else, right? So, I mean, I think it's definitely a lot of potential there. But how can we get our name out? I think that's the area we can look at. It's the same thing we're doing with the locums. As we see people come here, they seem to have the number of more and more long-term locums. I think it'd be better to have full-time physicians here rather than locums, but I think we can take what we can get right now.
For sure. Councillor Rapato, do you have any questions or comments before I wrap up? So I do have a couple of notes for you, Austin.
Sure thing.
My first note is thank you for adding my picture to the presentation.
You're very, we did it just for you, Mel.
You better be sure that I definitely noticed. So I'm glad to hear that there has been an increase in residents to your rosters. That's always makes us happy. As you can see, the council is very, very happy and certainly considers Alamos, an extension of, an extension to Wawa, even though you are located just outside of Duberville. So, we very much consider you ours as well.
There's enough to share.
For better or for worse. But, to date, we have, benefited certainly from, contributions and collaborative partnerships with Alamos, certainly from whether it's health or from contributions and usage of our local airport. So we really appreciate that. And we would certainly really, we would look forward to those partnerships continuing. My question is there an appetite to solidify those partnerships so we can, as we look forward to expanding our economic development programs and look forward to, kind of nailing down our budgeting, to kind of setting out an ESG plan between Alamos and the municipality of Wawa, so we can say, moving forward, we're going to try and work on project A, B, and C. Certainly our airport is always one that I know that has been in discussion, but we have discussed really nailing down joint economic development goals like housing or other things that might benefit, like investment readiness or things like that.
Well, I think very much so. Yeah, it's something I think what I think we've done so far, to be lack of a better term, has been kind of a bit of a hodgepodge. It hasn't been much of a strategy to it. We want to make sure that we don't miss opportunities, that we make sure it's mutually beneficial. The airport in particular, as you know, is a critical part of our existing operation. One of the things we identify, as you can imagine, there's not very many mining engineers and geologists that are running around here in this region. So we had to go a bit further afield to secure them, as well as a lot of our management team. So that airport's been absolutely critical to our success. As you see right now, we've teamed up and we're sharing those flights with Argonaut as well, so we're becoming more and more important to them as well. As we look down the road, I think that's one area we'd be very interested in seeing what we can do to improve as an example, because we're going to become more and more dependent upon it as time goes on. So let's see how can we work together on that, make sure we both get the biggest bang for our buck out of that. And just the same thing with housing and strategy there is, I mean, what makes the most sense? If you take a look around them, there's not very much supporting industry to it. I mean, one of the things we are looking at is can we bring some vendors more local to us? Because if nothing else, this COVID crisis has showed us, having a warehouse across the border in the US is not close enough, right? And things we're looking, can we move things more local, more central? And it's conversations we are having with Argonaut as well, is there's opportunity to share resources, share vendors as well when appropriate, right? They're a very different mind than we are, as you know. But there are a lot of shared resources, shared opportunities there.
For sure. And I think that's where Councillor Hoffman was going with his question. But as we look to develop industrial land and we want to maybe become a mining supply and service town,
yep.
We really want to, as opposed to shooting a dart into the blindness, we want to make sure that we collaborate and strategize with you as the largest mine in the area to make sure that we're doing the right things.
I appreciate it, because we're going to be here for the long haul, and we want to make sure, again, it's mutually beneficial. Because like I've said before, what we've seen here is that those that are local, whether it be employees or vendors or whatever, they have skin in the game. They're committed. And what we're trying to establish is those long-term relationships with those parties, because at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation. Like I mentioned before, when we look at our fly-in, fly-out or drive-in, drive-out employees, that typically average tenure is between that 3 to 5 year range. And we have a number of local employees that are crossing the 17, 18-year horizon right now. A lot of them, their mean tenure right now is only 5 to 6 years. So that's the advantage. They're local. They want to grow with us. They're committed. We're committed. And that's the relationship we want to have ultimately. If we can ultimately be predominantly residential, that would be our preference by far.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions, and it doesn't look like anybody else does. So I'd like to thank you very much for making the drive in, and thank you very much, Nish, for coming as well. I look forward to many more conversations. And
as do I, Melanie. Thank you very much for your time, guys, and thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
I'm not sure if we gave you a goose pin. Austin might have one, but I don't think Nish has one.
I actually don't. I keep being.
Oh. Well, here we go.
Now we're official. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Austin. Okay, so we'll move on from item number 4, delegations and presentations, to the adoption of minutes. 5.1, Committee of the Whole, Tuesday, February 7th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Councillor Hoffman, seconder. Councillor Opato. All in favor? Carried. There's no items under 6, 7, 8, or 9. So we'll move on to next meeting date, Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. Item number 11, adjournment. Close of meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Cannon, all in favor? Carried. And if you just give me a couple of minutes, we'll move over to the regular council agenda. Thank you. Let me know when you're ready, Manuela. Perfect. Item number 1, we'll call the meeting to order and note the members present at 7:27 p.m. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Let the record show that Councillor Cannon has a conflict of interest.
I do. I, Councillor Kathy Cannon, declare a potential indirect pecuniary interest on item number 11.2 and 11.3, the approval of the waiver fees for the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby.
Thank you very much.
Can I also say something else?
Yes, you may.
I would like to apologize to Mayor and Council and staff and the public. I didn't realize I had a conflict of interest, and once I did, I honestly didn't think I had a conflict, so I apologize for that to everybody.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Item number 3, approval of agenda.
Resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council scheduled for Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 be approved as presented.
All in favor? Carried. Item number 4, delegations and presentations. There is none. Announcements and giving notice. There are many meetings listed under announcements and notice. Councillors, is there any announcements? Does anybody wish to make an announcement? Councillor Cannon?
I was fortunate enough I took in the carnival, some of the carnival events last weekend, and it was wonderful. So for anybody who missed any of the events, The fireworks were wonderful. The pancake breakfast was delicious. And the soapbox races were so cute. Like, I miss when my kids used to do it. Well done, Alex and your team, and the committee.
Councillor Cannon, I echo that statement. They were excellent. So thank you very much, Alex. Item number 6, adoption of minutes.
Moved by Councillor Opato, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the following minutes of the meeting of council be adopted as presented. Minutes of a regular meeting of council held on Tuesday, February 7th, 2023, as contained on pages 1 to 7, inclusive of the minute book. Minutes of a special meeting of council held on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, as contained on pages 1 to 2, inclusive of the minute book.
All in favor? Carried. Item number 7, correspondence. There is only one item of correspondence today. AOD get together. So that's there for review. Item number 8, consent agenda.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Opato. Resolved that the items listed under the consent agenda, item 8.2 to 8.6, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. Number 9, staff reports.
Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby receive staff report KS 2023-2, draft policy temporary outdoor patios.
All in favor? Carried. Number 10, business arising out of previous minutes. There is none. Item number 11, new business. 11.1.
Moved by Councillor Opato, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa authorizes the submission of a funding application to Rural Economic Development Program for an updated community improvement plan.
All in favor? Carried. Item 11.2. We'll give Councillor Cannon a moment to vacate her seat. Yes, I'm going to open the floor for questions. Item 11.2, approve additional waiver of fees 2023 Wawa Ice Fishing Derby.
Moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Opato. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby approve a waiver of fees of up to $3,000, not including HST if required, for the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby to go towards the rental cost of rooms at the Mishpacotton Memorial Community Center for the period of Friday, March 3rd, 2023 to Sunday, March 5th, 2023.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, you have to forgive me, Alex, because I was away for a while. When I read the what you wrote on that, like, it sounds like if you go over $3,000, you're going to start charging. Like, I don't like the amount of money put in there. Is that in the bylaw? You know how you had $3,000 cap?
The cap in the policy is $1,500. The reason $3,000 was put in the resolution because that's the charge of the arena to the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby for that time.
Yeah.
So essentially the donation as per the resolution covers off all fees to the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby for use of the arena.
Okay, where is it? Is it in a bylaw that says something about the $3,000 for future
That's the next resolution coming up.
Okay, like,
To amend the policy, which technically policies are bylaws.
okay,
But it would be to amend the policy to grant the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby that $3,000 essentially donation every year. So to your point,
Okay.
should the fees go up, then the fishing derby would be charged the difference between that $3,000.
yeah, so why is it you're putting in the 3,000?
That's just because that's this year's fee, and it's a nice round.
So you'll only always go as far as 3,000.
Well, so we typically increase fees by a couple percent per year,
Mhm.
but those fees are also subject to their council's schedule fees, right? So as staff, we would recommend, I think this year we recommended what, Manuel, 2% for most things at the arena?
Most things were 2%.
Yeah, so we would come back to council next year with a schedule fee recommendation that would be based off of what the costs were at the arena, what inflation has been, things like that, which may or may not increase that particular fee.
Okay, but this policy doesn't mean it's in law. Like every year we could look at this?
Absolutely. The intention is not, so it doesn't continue to come back to council, but policies are council policies. So
Yeah.
council can decide to ask staff to change them, to give us recommendations on what you would like to see change them, and fundamentally they are adopted by council. So if council would like to see something different in the policy, then that's at council's discretion.
Okay,
Discuss it.
okay. So come next year, we'll see what the charge is and see what the,
Mhm.
because I mean, they don't make a whole lot of money to start the year next year. I mean, we need more than that to start when you look at their budget. Okay, I understand. It can be changed and okay, if we pick it up.
Councillor Hoffman?
Okay, so you could have charged the fishing derby $3,000 to have our facilities. You gave them a $1,500 waiver, so now all they have to do is pay us $1,500.
That's not what's what's being proposed.
Before they wrote to council, you're correct. So originally what had happened was the fees for a special event for the arena at the community center are $1,000 a day for using that particular space. So $3,000 in total. The fee waiver policy that was passed by the previous council at the end of its term said a list of things that make something eligible or ineligible. And one of those provisions was a maximum of $1,500 per year waiver. Now, the policy that was passed means the fish derby is ineligible for any type of waiver. So in theory, they should have been charged the full $3,000, but council at the time did mention to staff that it was important to council that the fish derby get a waiver. There's a provision in the policy that says that I can talk to the CAO and make some decisions around community events and things like that. So I approached the CAO. We were both in agreement to offer the fish derby the full waiver as set out in policy, which is $1,500. So as staff, we're not allowed to waive more than $1,500 because that's the authority that's been delegated to us by council. The fish derby didn't like that. They wanted the full amount of fees waived, which is why they were approached by council. So right now in the resolution, it's saying that council is waiving the fees, providing a $3,000 donation to the fish derby as a resolution for council to vote on tonight. So that's up to you.
And if I may, I agree with the original. I was part of the old council. I believe that we should follow the policy that was laid out and allow the fish derby to have a maximum of $1,500 fee waiver. No more. I don't believe that we should make an exception to allow a $3,000 to go over and above the $1,500 to go to the $3,000 request. Part of my belief is that they submitted financial statements saying they have a profit. They show a profit at the end of the year of, I believe it was $17,000, but it was just shy of $20,000. So they had the capacity to pay $1,500. In addition to that, we are setting a precedent if council is going to waive all fees for the fish derby on the basis that they do good work, but all of our volunteers do good work. So if we do it for the fish derby, then where do we draw that line? Do we do it for the curling club? Do we do it for the dancers? Do we do it for the hockey, well, minor hockey? Like, there's just no line. Where do you draw it, right?
Then it's a decision to be made every year.
Well, it's the policy was written and approved by council, and was a lot of thought was put into it. So I believe that we should, once you start making exceptions, then it's a very, very slippery slope.
Okay, so the bottom line, they're looking for a $3,000 waiver. We are going to give them a $1,500 waiver.
As per policy.
Still owe us $1,500.
No.
The policy says $1,500. They're going to get a $1,500 waiver. They're supposed to be charged $3,000,
Mm-hmm.
but the policy says we're going to give you 50% off.
May I speak to this? So originally, Alex and the CAO, Maury O'Neill, had offered the Fish Derby $1,500 waiver as per the policy that was set out last year. Since then, the Fish Derby has come and requested an additional $1,500 for a total of $3,000. So this resolution is asking to confirm the $3,000. So if council accepts this resolution tonight, the Fish Derby will get $3,000. If council rejects this tonight, then it is again in Alex's hands to offer them the $1,500 as a maximum. So a rejection is a rejection only to the 3,000, not to the full waiver. Alex still has that opportunity to give them the 1,500.
So if we're all in understanding what the resolution is, do you understand it fully?
I'm willing to let 1,500 ride, but I still think they should pay $1,500.
Okay, so then we can do a vote. Then I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, I don't agree with you at all, Jim and Melanie, because I think if you guys start adding up what this Fish Derby does for this town, for motels, for meals, for gas,
But with
I'm talking, because all that money, you're going to lose the Fish Derby if you start charging them. You're going to lose the volunteers.
Can I?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm done.
No,
Thank you very much, Councillor Hatfield.
no,
Councillor Hoffman?
because I agree they do good things, but, what did I write down here?
So
If they have 1,300 participants, all we are asking for, each one of those has to pay less than $1.50, and we will get our $1,500.
so I'm gonna
It's
yeah. So Councillor Hoffman, this is the regular meeting, so I'm gonna let it vote. We'll call for a vote because I think that's what we're looking for. We'll do a recorded vote, and that's how we'll move forward with this decision.
Could I ask Manuela to explain it to me again so I understand it properly?
Okay, so I will read the resolution one more time and then I will explain it. So moved by Councillor Hoffman, seconded by Councillor Opato, resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby approve a waiver of fees of up to $3,000, not including HST if required, for the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby to go towards the rental cost of rooms at the Mishpicot Memorial Community Center for the period of Friday, March 3rd, 2023 to Sunday, March 5th, 2023. So by voting yes, you're agreeing to this. By voting no, you are allowing Alex to offer the 1,500.
Okay. Councillor Hoffman, do you vote yes or no on the resolution on the table?
which ones no? Which
So
ones?
yes is the 3,000. No is allowing Alex the opportunity to offer
No.
1,500.
Councillor Opato.
I'll say no.
Councillor Hatfield?
Yes.
Manuela, I vote no.
Thank you very much. The motion is not carried.
All in favor? Carried. Was not carried, sorry.
Defeated. The motion.
Defeated. Okay, perfect. So we will move on to item 11.3.
Can we get Kathy
No.
back?
No, she declared conflict on this item as well.
Oh,
So moved by Councillor Hatfield, seconded by Councillor Opato. Resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Wawa does hereby approve the amendment of policy number MM010, waiver of municipal facility fees, to add the following clause, number 2.8, exception as follows. Despite other requirements of this policy, the Wawa Ice Fishing Derby is approved for an annual donation of up to $3,000, not including HST, per year from the municipality to go towards the rental cost of rooms at the Mishpacotton Memorial Community Center during the annual Wawa Derby.
Is there any questions or discussion? Would you like a recorded vote on this as well?
Didn't we just vote on this?
yeah.
This is, go ahead, Alex.
Was for what to do this particular year. The second vote is to change the policy for this and future years until the policy is looked at again. So voting on this in a similar way defeats that, and then the policy sits as is, where there is no change to the policy, and I'm still going to do the same things that I'm allowed to do within the policy. Whereas if you vote yes on this, then that will change the policy, which will directly contradict the last vote, technically.
What did I say? No?
Yes, you said no. Councillor Pato? Councillor Hatfield? No. The motion is defeated. And now we can, Councillor Pato, did you want to grab Kathy? Or Councillor Cannon? I try really hard to use everybody's last names. Item number 12, notice of motion, there is none. Item number 13, bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Opato, seconded by Councillor Cannon. Resolved that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that the mayor and deputy clerk do sign and seal the same, any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. Bylaw number 357423, to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 15th day of February 2023 and the 21st day of February 2023. Bylaw number 357523, to enter into an agreement with the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation for funding assistance for the Northern Ontario Internship Program for a tourism marketing internship project number 7400706. Bylaw number 357623, to authorize the sale of the municipal land described as parcel 529, section Mishpacotton, part lot 1034, plan M131 McMurray, as in LT 42278 Mishpacotton, pin 31169-1270, parcel 68, section Mishpacotton, SRO, lot 1035, plan M131 McMurray, lot 1034, plan M131 McMurray, except lot 42278 Mishpacotton, pin 31169-0991, parcel 91, section Mishpacotton, SRO, lot 1036, plan M131 McMurray, except lot 44546 Mishpacotton, pin 31169-0996.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for that, Manuela.
you.
Item 14 and 50, there is nothing. Item 16, next meeting date, Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. Item number 17, adjournment, close of meeting.
Moved by Counselor Opato, seconded by Counselor Cannon. Be it resolved that the meeting closed at 7:50 p.m.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great